Well, no sooner do we have a full 30 plus minute long state of play video for Gran Turismo 7 only about a month away from its release, but we have even more to talk about. Now, most of these things were also from that state of play event, some of which I noticed and forgot to mention, a couple of which I didn't see, and one in particular which doesn't come from the event. It actually was brought to my attention on the Discord for this channel, so thanks to the folks over there, you know who you are. And this one is worth noting for sure and comes from a Japanese, I believe, gaming magazine or Gran Turismo related magazine. And that is first of all that we have confirmation of the Nissan 400Z being in Gran Turismo 7. This one had been talked about, there was conjecture about it being featured. Of course, it wouldn't be surprising if it were, considering Gran Turismo's history with Nissan. I believe they used to be partnered with them, if I recall correctly. So, to the surprise of no one, that does appear to be in the game. Doubtless it will give the Supra a good run for its money as well, some rivalry there. Moving into the state of play aspect, though, a couple of these were even mentioned in DMs that I got, messages, plenty of comments on that video as well. So let's talk about the biggest one first, engine swaps. We did see in the tuning section of that video when the Beetle was being compared stock versus tuned, you could hear a notable difference in the video between them, but I actually missed the fact on the spec sheet that the engine is different, and it's not just a bored-out engine, because for those of you who have been playing Gran Turismo for a long while, you will of course remember that you could bore out the engine back in the day, which increases the capacity, but not by this much. You didn't go from like a 1200cc Beetle to a 3.8 litre, so clearly that has been swapped. Most likely with a Porsche, a GT3 engine for example in the case of that Beetle. Now, with that being said, this is one of those things where we really don't know what kind of implementation and what kind of scope this is going to have. Because ironically enough, when it comes to engine swaps in Beetles and customization, Forza Horizon 5, which of course I've also been covering on the channel, had an interesting kind of little equivalent of this, wherein there's a special Beetle in that game, the Forza edition, which has certain upgrades that you cannot do to a normal Beetle. So it just comes like that already. So it's possible that a Beetle may have like a variation with an engine swap, but from what they showed in the video, it does look like it's a stock versus tuned example. Otherwise, that would be a bit disingenuous. So it would appear that at least on some models, engine swaps might be an option. Now, we don't know the extent of that, of course, and engine swaps in Gran Turismo have always been a very hotly wanted thing. I would love it if they have it implemented. I did make a video a little while ago on the channel about the dangers of engine swaps. In my opinion, Forza has kind of got to a point, especially in Horizon 4, of overdoing that. When you can put the same engine in everything, it kind of makes cars feel a little bit cheap. Whereas I feel that if Gran Turismo did that, I think they would honestly implement it a little bit better. Having like a Porsche engine in a Beetle, or say a Corvette engine in, I don't know, some other Chevy, for example, or an applicable car, an engine which would actually fit in said vehicle and which would be appropriate to it. So that is probably the number one thing in the video. Another couple of interesting tuning things which were noted though were that nitrous oxide is coming back. That's pretty cool, and I must say that's a surprise to me. I wouldn't have thought they'd have gone back to something like that, but having NOS back in the game, it's pretty cool. It's fun for drag racing. It does give you that little bit of an advantage, depending on when you choose to use it, especially, of course, on Special Stage Route X racing, for example. It kind of acts like an overboost in Formula 1. It's a cool little thing to have implemented back in the game. We then also have what seems to be the implementation of anti-lag in the game as well. And for those who don't know what anti-lag is, it's most commonly seen in more rally-prepped machines, maybe some Gymkhana stuff, some rallycross, that kind of thing, wherein it brings the car up to the prime RPM for a launch, which is when you can, for example, hear the difference between someone just revving up a car, and then you'll hear something like a rally car where it goes like and hits those revs, holds it there, and then launches off the line. As I said, keeping it at the ideal RPM for that launch. So that's going to be pretty cool in the game. It's not something which we've ever needed before, but since they are having drag racing full on included in this game, which it was not included in on GT Sport, of course, but not in 6 either, and I don't recall it being in 5, but it might have been. It was included in GT4 though. That's going to be interesting to see how they use that. I think drag racing will probably be where we see it used the most, but we'll have to see, ultimately. The rest of these things are vehicles, which I forgot to mention or didn't notice. The first one I forgot to mention, and that's the Ferrari F430 is confirmed. Of course, not a new car, that is a returning face. It was a premium in Gran Turismo 6 already. We have a newer shape, Mercedes C63 AMG. The Mercedes AMG 63, as they call it these days, instead of Mercedes-Benz. That's interesting, a much newer face, and quite a new car by Gran Turismo standards, where the cars they add tend to be a little bit older, let's say. They kind of lag behind adding the latest cars. We have a Ferrari 308, I believe it was, noticed on that 400 car page, where you can see 400 cars written across the screen and then all those little vehicles shown. We have, of course, the most important one that I'm going to mention on the entire list, rounding us out, the Toyota Aqua, which I know you've all been waiting for. I mean, this car is just going to dominate all forms of racing in Gran Turismo 7. But in all seriousness, it was staring me right in the face, and I just forgot, to be honest, to mention it. It's not exactly a high priority car for many of us, but if nothing else, it could end up being something of a meme car. So again, a returning face. That's not a new car as such, because that was in GT6. So just a few additional things from that video and outside of the video, which we didn't cover in that breakdown. So ultimately, of course, with Gran Turismo 7 right around the corner, you'll probably want to be sticking around on the channel, because I'm going to be putting out a huge amount of content for GT7 in March. I'm going to be doing a day one video where it's basically like my first look at playing the game, so you see it as I'm seeing it. It won't be live, but it will essentially be like watching a live stream. I'm going to be, of course, doing a review of the game. That will probably be a little bit later when I've really settled into it. A ton of tuning. You guys know that's coming already. Probably some car reviews and features of the new vehicles first, then get into some of the familiar or existing faces from GT Sport. And of course, some of the stuff which you would expect to find on this channel, like money farming methods, the best way for beginners to earn credits in the game. And for those of you who are newer to the channel, I put out a video probably something like a year ago at this point called I believe it was GT7 Strategy Guide, wherein the game isn't out yet, but I gave you the full strategy guide of how the game is probably going to work, and I'm still really interested to see how much of that turns out to be exactly spot on true. So might be worth checking that one out if nothing else but for the memes, and of course stick around on the channel for more in future. But for now, as always, thanks for watching.